Tēnā koutou katoa e hui nei e tēnei wā. E mihi mahana kia koutou kua tai mai ki tēnei hui o Transparency International New Zealand. Tēnā koutou e mātanga o te moana nui a Kiwa, the Great Pacific. Tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou. Tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou. Ko Julie Heki Takawingoa, ko Kai Whakahaere au ki Transparency International Aotearoa. Greetings to you all. We're so honoured by your attendance at our webinar today. Greetings to experts from across the Pacific countries. Talofa, malolele, nisabula, kia orana, hello ogeta, g'day, kaya, winya, and diagwich. And kia ora, of course. I'm Julie Haggie, and it's my honour to greet you today to the third of our first series of webinars in the 3x3 that we're holding to encourage information sharing and courageous discussion with Pacific people, including in Aotearoa. Our aim is to improve understanding and transparency around some really gnarly issues. This first series is focusing on financial integrity systems and how people use those, including in New Zealand and Australia. They're really critical to supporting business and economies, but some organisations and people use them corruptly, so they can evade taxes, hide their assets, and enable illegal trade and things like drugs and guns and other illicit activities. And this, of course, affects us all and impoverishes us morally and also financially. Our first webinar, the recording is on our website, and we looked at money laundering, how that affected Pacific communities, and why strong anti-money laundering systems matter, and then and about how to battle corruption, and of course, reducing corruption is what Transparency International is all about. The second session, which looked at transnational organised crime in the Pacific. And again, it was a wonderful session, and again, that recording's online. I'm also going to put a link to a report that's just been released in New Zealand about corruption and corruption in the Pacific, and particularly to do with transnational organised crime. And I think anybody who's in the Pacific should be reading this. It's quite an important report by the Ministerial Advisory Group. So I think it's very informative. But today we're looking at beneficial ownership. Knowing who owns companies and trusts that are operating in our countries is an essential tool to fight corruption, because ill-doers thrive in obscurity. They need hidden financial networks to transfer and hide their money and assets. So today, our aim is for this quite complex topic to be broken down a bit and looking at it in a clear way. So a big shout out to Josa Nailati, whose anti-corruption song Stand Ups drew us together today. Also acknowledging Rochelle, who's constructed these series of webinars and done all the hard mahi, and to Grow, who are running the tech for these webinars, and to the funders for these events, Transparency International, with funding provided by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Australia. I'm going to hand over to Emily Manuel shortly, but just a couple of housekeeping rules that I'm sure we all know already, but I'll repeat. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube site. Please make sure you keep your cameras off and your microphones on silent. Also, bearing in mind we have variable internet connections across the Pacific. Some might need to, that can affect your connectivity. We might need to bring all the cameras down at some point if we have to. This is an information sharing event, and so we assume a range of understanding on the topic. If you don't ask anything, please put a question in the chat. Use the chat to ask questions. The whole point of this is a learning exercise. There's no dumb questions. We want to have kōrero that is useful. We are very happy also to field questions after the event. And finally, our values at Transparency International are integrity, courage, transparency, respect, and non-partisanship. And we bring those values to this today. So we respect different opinions. We can all learn from each other. Anyway, that's enough talk from me. I'm now going to hand over to Emily, our facilitator. Emily Manuel is Open Ownership Senior Manager for Asia Pacific. She leads initiatives to support governments to implement beneficial ownership transparency. She's worked as a consultant for the Philippine government and various international organisations, including the British Council and the Asia Foundation. She helped draft policies and implement key reforms. She's also worked for a global data engineering company where she managed projects on artificial intelligence. She is also currently a lecturer at New Era University, where she teaches information technology law. So I'm going to hand over to you, Emily, and thanks very much. We're really looking forward to this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. And I'd like to express my gratitude to Transparency International New Zealand for inviting me to be your facilitator for today. I'm joined by several speakers whom I will be introducing shortly, but I would like to start the session with a bit of input from our participants. I'd like to ask you, and you please feel free to type it in the chat, whether have you heard of beneficial ownership before? And if you can let us know which country you're joining us from, it would make the conversation more engaging, given that the topic today, as Julie had mentioned, is very interesting, but it could also get quite technical. So for the first part of the session, I will walk you through what beneficial ownership transparency is and why is it important? Why do we need to talk about this topic? This webinar comes as the last of the 3-part series. So we've grounded you already on topics around AML and transnational crimes. Now we want to go deeper. We want to take a deep dive into exactly how these crimes, are undertaken and what are the roles of companies in facilitating these types of crimes and other forms of corruption. Globally, there is a study that 70% of grand corruption cases actually involve anonymously owned companies. So it's worth taking a deep dive. Again, feel free to type in the chat your questions at any time. The speaker's profile will also be shared with you in the chat. So if you can give me a minute, I will be sharing my screen and walking you through what beneficial ownership is. So I just want to confirm that I'm sharing my screen in full view. So before I begin, I just want to briefly talk you through who we are. So we, in Open Ownership, deal specifically on beneficial ownership. And with our support, we have advanced beneficial ownership transparency reforms in over 35 countries. We provide technical assistance to governments to implement BOT reforms and to develop registries. We also provide policy research and evidence. So if you'd like to go and visit our website, we have several resources there to understand and evidence good practices globally. So that is openownership.org. And then we also provide technical support. We have developed the beneficial ownership data standard, which is the leading standard in collecting information about beneficial ownership. We also support data exchange. So what is BOT? Beneficial ownership transparency refers to transparency over who ultimately owns and controls corporate vehicles. Now, I want to stress here the element of control. We are all familiar with how companies are formed. Companies would typically have what is known as legal owners. They could be members of the board, they could be incorporators. But what beneficial ownership transparency looks at is actually who is controlling this company. So in addition to ownership, you're talking about people who are actually benefiting from this company. And what does control actually mean? Control includes making decisions about appointment of board members, making decisions about where the company is going to invest its funds, someone who can benefit directly from assets of the company through either, making decisions about percentages of profit sharing. So these are the hidden owners behind these companies. And more often than not, they are not declared as part of the company ownership declaration forms that governments would usually collect. So I just wanted to stress the element of control here. So BOT answers the question, who is actually benefiting from this company? Because you see all of these companies being set up that seem to be engaging in legitimate business. And it's true, most companies are set up to do legitimate work. However, as I mentioned earlier, these companies are also being used to do illicit activities, including money laundering, terrorist financing, and of course, other types of corruption schemes. So I just wanted to take a minute to try to highlight here what the difference is between legal owners and beneficial owners. So legal owners and beneficial owners are distinct, but sometimes they do overlap. In this particular example that you will see, the target company or the declaring company, Company D, is owned by person A and Company C. So they have split ownership. So in the horizontal green bar, these are the legal owners. However, the concept of beneficial ownership requires you to look for a real natural person who ultimately owns and controls that company. So you can't stop your investigation with Company C. You have to go further up to find the natural person who owns it. And in this situation, it turns out that person B actually owns 100% of Company C. So in answering the question, who are the beneficial owners of Company D, your answer would be both person A and person B, because Company C, not being a natural person, could not be the beneficial owner. Now, the challenge for a lot of investigators, for a lot of CSOs, journalists, is trying to find out information about person B. Most often than not, if a country is only collecting information about legal owners but not beneficial owners, then person B remains obscure. So that is the challenge when we are talking about implementing beneficial ownership transparency. And then I just want to take a minute again to reiterate some of the benefits of implementing BOT reforms. The first is building business and market confidence. Businesses who just want to do, legitimate business, come in and invest in the country, want to be assured that they are entering a fair market. They want to be assured that their competitors are also doing legitimate business. And so they having beneficial ownership information made public would actually help these businesses to investigate who they're dealing with and to make the corresponding decisions around risks. Number two is running effective tax systems. A lot of companies are also being used to evade tax. And you see this in instances, for instance, of transfer pricing, where companies would create another company and then use that company to be able to avoid paying taxes. They can also claim that they have paid taxes in one jurisdiction to avoid paying taxes in the jurisdiction that they're located in, and try to manipulate all of these bilateral tax agreements to avoid paying taxes. Beneficial ownership is actually used to relate these companies to one another so that tax investigators then are able to determine whether or not they are validly claiming tax benefits in another country, or whether they are related parties in terms of their tax transactions. The third is on improving governance and state procurement. There is a lot of benefit in using beneficial ownership in knowing who is contracting with the government, considering that these are public funds. It makes it all the more important that the real owners behind these companies who are getting state contracts are revealed to the public. Fourth, beneficial ownership can also be used to tackle corruption and criminal activities, because having A publicly accessible register, for instance, could help investigative journalists and CSOs to find out more about the activities of politically exposed persons. It also makes it harder for criminals to move and hide these stolen funds. And finally, in the recovery of stolen assets, a lot of BOT has been proven very effective in terms of finding where these assets are, considering that we all know that crime and corruption is a transnational issue. And so finally, I want to end here. I just want to stress that knowing who owns, controls, and benefits from corporate vehicles is an essential asset in fighting corruption. It can aid in investigative efforts, reduce risk through informed decision-making, and enable insights and impact through analysis of data. And finally, as I would like to stress, a transnational problem needs a transnational solution. When governments think about implementing BOT, they need to think beyond their borders. How can they share that data not only to their own law enforcers, but how they can share that data to law enforcers from other countries as well? So I would end here for now, and if we have time later, I'm happy to share certain case studies. In any case, you will receive my presentation, which contains, a comprehensive explanation of what I just discussed. So to proceed with our discussion for today, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. So if you can just give me a minute, my screen is okay. Our next speaker is Florica Dragomir. She is the project manager for UNDP Pacific Anti-Corruption Project, and she is based in Fiji. And she's going to talk to us about the lessons from the recently held UNDP Pacific BOT dialogue. And she's also going to walk us through the challenges and opportunities for Pacific Island governments in implementing BOT. So over to you, Florica.
Thank you very much, Emily. Rochelle, can you help me with the PowerPoint presentation, please?
It's coming.
Can you go to the first slide, please? So thank you very much, Transparency International, for inviting me to this webinar. Thank you very much, Emily. I will tell you a few words about our experience with beneficial ownership events and different activities here in the Pacific. So transparency of the beneficial ownership of legal persons and legal arrangements is increasingly regarded as an essential element in the fight against corruption and as a tool for preventing money laundering and terrorism financing. Multiple case studies have demonstrated that corporate structures, such as companies, trusts, foundations, and fictitious entities, are often exploited to obscure the identities of those involved in large-scale corruption and to conceal or move illicit funds. As a result, international efforts to prevent the misuse of corporate vehicles for financial crime have intensified. Countries are required by various international and regional legal frameworks and policy initiatives to take measures to ensure beneficial ownership transparency of legal persons and legal arrangements, including the FATF recommendations, EU anti-money laundering directives, OECD Global Forum on Transparency and Exchange of Information for Tax Purposes, the UNCAC, United Nations Convention Against Corruption, and the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. One best practice to implement beneficial ownership we identify is that there is a need to establish a beneficial ownership register. BO registers are essential to promote transparency and regulatory compliance. There is a need for legal frameworks that mandate the collection, maintenance, and accessibility of BO data. Having a well-structured and centralized register ensures that competent authorities can access BO information in a timely manner. However, based on the experience of other countries, there is a need to ensure the effectiveness, meaning adequacy, accuracy, and up-to-dateness of these registers by putting in place adequate legal framework and technical systems. Next slide, please. Many jurisdictions have taken significant steps in this direction by introducing and implementing various reforms in their BO frameworks, including the establishment of centralized BO registers. Some countries that have introduced centralized BO registers include, for instance, Austria, Belgium, Brazil, Colombia, France, Germany, Indonesia, United Kingdom, and many other countries. These measures aim to enhance the ability to accurately identify and verify the BOs of legal persons and legal arrangements. Additionally, such reforms help mitigate reputational risk and avoid negative assessments from international institutions, as I said, the Global Forum or the FATF, which issue recommendations for combating tax evasion, money laundering, and terrorism financing. Some countries, such as the United Kingdom, Montenegro, and other European countries, have mandated BO disclosures simultaneously across all companies within their economy. In contrast, others, like Armenia, Slovakia, and other countries, initially prioritized BO disclosures for specific sectors, such as the extractive sector or companies participating in public procurement, before gradually the requirements to cover all sectors and entities. When drafting the legal framework of the BO register, the relevant designated authority should ensure that the BO information can be used for other purposes along with the fight against money laundering, for example, fight against the predicate offenses associated to money laundering, including tax fraud and corruption. The scope of the legal persons and legal arrangements covered should also be clearly defined. Although no exemptions are provided in the international standards, authorities should have a clear view of the legal persons and legal arrangements, specifics, and how the legal framework could be built to better fit their reality and the risks associated therewith. Next slide, please. Concerning the legal framework, many international organizations, including UNDP, have been actively involved in discussions with many Pacific Island countries about the specifics of legal reform. Some countries already have introduced BO concept in some of their business entity laws, and others are in the process of finalizing proposed legislation. All Pacific countries are aware of the need for legal reform and are at the stage where actual policy work to support passage of appropriate laws together with legislative drafting needs to commence. The law must be settled before a registry is implemented to make certain that the registry software design specifications accurately reflect what is required so as to avoid costly change orders during the software project. So this work is a critical first step. In February, UNDP organized a regional conference on beneficial ownership transparency. And during this regional conference, Fiji highlighted that it is working towards a legislative framework for a national bioregister under the Registrar of Companies. This initiative aims to provide authorities with real-time access to ownership data, ensuring that businesses comply with transparency requirements. Another country from Pacific, Tonga, identified that it is working to introduce legal amendments to integrate biodata collection into existing business registries, streamlining compliance processes and reducing the risk of financial crime. Cook Island has transitions from a manual system to an automated registry, ensuring greater accessibility and efficiency. Digitalization will enable authorities to conduct more effective monitoring and enforcement of compliance obligations. Meanwhile, PNG and Solomon Islands are focusing on digitization, interagency cooperation, and information sharing mechanisms to strengthen regulatory oversight. These regional approaches underscore the importance of adopting technological innovations and international best practices in beneficial ownership transparency. Next slide, please. Many Pacific countries have business entity registries and personal property security registries. There are personal property security registries in all countries that have business entity registry. Countries that have only a personal property security registry include Republic of Marshall Islands and the Federated States of Micronesia. Fiji has also a personal property security registry, but Fiji implemented its own business entity registry. Kiribati is close to implement a business entity registry. Nauru has a registry that is supported by the government of New Zealand. PNG, Cook Island, Tonga, and Palau all have modern business entity registries that are easily expanded to include additional registry types such as a bioregistry. Also, Samoa, Solomon Islands, and Vanuatu have implemented business entity registries. These systems can also be adapted for a bioregistry. These registries are part of a regional registry platform procured by PSDI that allows for a variety of registry types to be implemented in a single platform. PSDI is the Pacific Private Sector Development Initiative, which is a regional technical assistance program undertaken in partnership with the government of Australia, the government of New Zealand, and the Asian Development Bank. Leveraging this regional registry platform is likely the most cost-efficient way in which to implement a bioregistry for Pacific Island countries. Next slide, please. National efforts to enhance beneficial ownership transparency. Pacific Island countries face a range of challenges. Some jurisdictions still lack explicit bio-disclosure requirements, while others need to update their regulatory frameworks to meet international standards. Weak legislative provisions and enforcement mechanisms make it difficult for authorities to ensure compliance, and gaps in the legal framework and the legal framework allow for exploitation by illicit actors seeking to conceal their financial activities. Another major challenge is the limited institutional capacity within government agencies and reporting entities to effectively implement and enforce bio requirements. Many regulatory bodies lack the necessary technical expertise and resource to manage biodata, conduct risk assessments, and enforce compliance. Another aspect noticed during our regional conference was that there is a limited understanding of the concept of beneficial ownership, both among supervisory authorities and reporting entities, and the challenges in its enforcement in practice. Without adequate training and capacity building efforts, even well-informed legislative reforms may struggle to achieve their intended objectives. Technological barriers further complicate the implementation of beneficial ownership transparency measures. Many countries in the Pacific region lack digital infrastructure for the efficient collection, storage, and verification of biodata. The absence of interoperable systems for cross-agency information sharing also hinders efforts to track illicit financial flows, and strengthening digital solutions and regulatory technology frameworks will be very important for ensuring that BOT measures are effective and sustainable. And next slide, please. The UNDP Regional Conference, organized in February, promoted the dialogue among regulators, financial intelligence units, private sector, and international partners to develop a collaborative approach in facilitating bioinformation sharing in Pacific. Discussions emphasized the need for coordinated regional efforts to develop a robust regulatory framework that ensures transparency and accountability. Capacity building initiatives were outlined to provide technical support and training for authorities and reporting entities, as well as wider outreach and awareness raising for the private sector. These initiatives will help bridge knowledge gaps and enable stakeholders to implement effective transparency measures in their respective jurisdictions. Under our anti-corruption project, funded by United Kingdom, we are currently finalizing a knowledge paper titled Roadmap on the Establishment and Functioning of Beneficial Ownership Registers in the Pacific, a guide for practitioners. This paper provides step-by-step guidance for countries seeking to establish reliable and functional bioregisters. It outlines a structured 9-step roadmap. Each activity is presented with practical recommendations and can be tailored or implemented in parallel to expedite progress. The guide is intended to support practitioners and decision makers across the Pacific and will be publicly available by the end of this month. It can be shared with all interested parties seeking to enhance beneficial ownership transparency and meet international standards. Thank you very much. And dear Emily, over to you.
So much, Florica. Thank you for outlining for us the current status of implementation in the Pacific. And you've highlighted one important thing, which is, the importance of starting with a good legislative framework to support implementation. It's very interesting that you pointed to the regional registry platform as an approach that is a quite unique approach, I think, to the Pacific. So very interesting to hear about that. So our next speaker, Deffnie, is a journalist and youth advocate who is based in Vanuatu, and she is going to talk about the role of youth and media in holding power to account and how journalists and civil society expose risks tied to hidden ownership and corruption. So I'm pleased to welcome our next speaker, Deffnie. Over to you.
Thank you, Emily. I would also like to thank TINZ for giving us this opportunity to at least share our experiences and our success stories to strengthening accountability and transparency in the Pacific. So, thank you, Rachel, for sharing this slide. Without further ado, I think I'll just go ahead and start my presentation. So, as a youth advocate, I would, begin my presentation to say that being at the government organization and also within the media industry has been a very challenging and good experience for me. And what I have learned is that young people are great changes. And what I believe is that young people are capable of using their voices to make a change within the community. And one part this one is to ensure that their voices are heard in terms of advocating for transparency and accountability. So I would like to begin by my first slide to say that in 2015, there's a number of young people who attended the first ever Pacific Youth Forum Against Corruption forum in Fiji. And it was one of the very first, if I can remember that. And that forum brings almost all Pacific Island countries to attend. And one of the main reasons behind is to make sure that young people who are attending will be going back and become youth advocates on matters relating to anti-corruption within their respective countries. And part of the anti-corruption forum also gave us the opportunity to have a toolkit. And one of the toolkit is to make sure that it will help us youth advocates to go back to our countries and then use this toolkit to organize integrated workshops for young people and youth groups as well to share the story of how young people can be part of the network of advocates to continue to share the need for having transparency and accountability within the communities, and also to help others know how to prevent and fight for corruption. Have the next slide. So a little bit about the integrity workshops and how we conducted it. So previously I worked with Vanuatu National Youth Council, and I would say that going out with the communities is also a challenge for us. Sometimes our workshops was it needed financial support, so we might risk the opportunity of going out further from Port Vila. So a lot of our workshops were done within FRT alone, and by chances, if we went out to communities, then that's where we'll also have our integrated workshops within the communities out from Port Vila or FRT. So within our workshops, we have to identify young people to attend the workshops, or also youth groups. And during the workshops, we normally raise awareness about corruption and the different types of corruption, and then how it would affect young people. And also to help them understand that they will be leaders one day, and being a youth is a long way to go. So they have to train to become good leaders, to make sure that in the near future, when they become leaders, then they will know how to deliver service to being in a transparent way. Next slide, please. This was one of our photos for one of our participants. So at the end of the session, we asked them what they would like to see in the future. And then one of them wrote this on a note, and I thought it would be nice to share. It says that if I fight corruption now, I believe my little brothers and sisters or youngster who will come after me will face a better and brighter future where it is free from corruption. So yes, this was one of our participants comment from one of our workshops in Port Vila. Thank you. Next slide. So apart from this, part of my role is also being a communications officer, and I used a lot of media tools. I believe that media is one of the very powerful tools to use nowadays, and especially in Vanuatu now with the use of social media, I think it has become one of the important tools to use. So part of our advocacies, we use a lot of media mediums, and especially newspaper. We go up on radio as well, and as well on social media to publish stories relating to youth issues, as well as anti-corruption issues, and several stories which we think might be important for young people to be taken care of or be aware of if it happens to be an issue that will be of impact to them. So we also, part of using media advocacy, we also decided to train young people, especially youth leaders, train them to use smartphones, because nowadays almost every youth, they have a smartphone on their hands. So what we try to encourage them to is to use smartphones, so they can use smartphones to share the stories within their communities. Like, so if any issues relating to youth or any issues that they think would affect them, they can only use their phone to share the story. So what we train them is to show them how they can write an article or short news, and then it comes along with pictures. And also we help them to do radio audio recordings, and as well as video interviews. And what we tell them is that if they feel like they cannot send it direct to the media outlets, then they can just send it to us, and then we can send it out to the media outlets to publish their stories. So some experience, I found out that we have very great stories for young people within the communities, and apart from that, they're also enjoying it because it's using phone and then trying to edit all these stuff, pictures, come to the story, and so they find it very interesting, and it's also a learning experience for them. Thank you. Next slide. So going forward, these are some points I've listed, I think, to make sure that we continue to do what we do. I think there should be an increase in the number of youth advocacies, especially for youth issues and anti-corruption. And also there is need to conduct more awareness with young people on integrated workshops, and also encourage
I think we've, unfortunately, Deffnie's got frozen. So I'm just going to stop share screening and we'll go back to you, Emily.
Okay, thank you so much, Julie. We'll wait for Deffnie to come back in a bit and maybe have some questions over for her. So what Deffnie has outlined is really the important role that the youth and the media has to play in terms of these transparency initiatives. One thing I would like to highlight is, and just to bridge our discussion and to tie it all together, is, a lot of governments focus their efforts around implementation. The true benefit of beneficial ownership transparency reforms is in data use. If the focus is only on collecting the data, but not so much on use, then a country really won't be able to reap the benefits. And when we're talking about data use, it's important to consider what the role is, not only of government stakeholders, but also CSOs, journalists, and the youth, as Deffnie has outlined for us. So with that, we'd like to open the floor for questions and comments. I see from the chat that a lot of the participants here are already quite knowledgeable on BOT, but let's try to surface a few more questions from the audience. We have one from Julie. For Pacific NGOs advocating on beneficial ownership registers or legislation who may not understand the detail, what are 3 most important advocacy points for them to make? And maybe I'd like to ask Florica if you have any input on this question. You're on mute, Florica.
Emily, maybe I saw that Nauru is with us and they already have a bioregister. Maybe we should ask Nauru about their experience with, because they already implemented this bioregister.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Florica. And we're very pleased to have Nauru in the room with us to share their experience. Maybe just if I can take a quick dab at this question as well, and welcome back, Deffnie. If I can take a quick dab on this particular question, I talked about data use. So for NGOs who are advocating for BOT, one of the most important issues or challenge that you will be facing is around access. Not all BO registries are made public. It is really up to the government to decide who they will give access to. And one of the issues is of course, on data protection and privacy. A lot of the declaring companies are going to say that, there's so much risk in their personal information being published. And so a lot of NGOs would struggle to convince their governments to give them access to this particular information. And then another challenge would be around the accuracy of the data and the accompanying sanctions. For some businesses, if the sanctions are not dissuasive enough, or if they consist mostly of financial penalties, for example, they will just consider that as a business expense, meaning they'd rather not declare their beneficial owner, for instance, and just pay the penalty instead of actually revealing their owners in instances where they're really up to no good. So we find that really thinking about the kind of sanctions that should be incorporated in the legal framework is very important. And NGOs have a lot to say around that. And then on the accuracy of the data, again, the end goal of BOT is not just data collection, but also data use. So you want to make sure that the data that is being collected is accurate, and then also that the proper government stakeholders would not only have access to it, like investigators, for instance, but would also be capacitated enough to use that data. We often find that even though, for instance, law enforcers have access to the data, they don't really know what to do with it in terms of supporting their investigation. And as Florica had suggested, and if it's possible, maybe we can have the participant, our delegate from Nauru, to maybe share some of their experience in implementing BOT reforms.
First, Emily, can I say a few words?
Yes.
I wanted to add that this is why during my presentation, I outlined that it is important to have the legal framework in place when you develop these tools or to implement beneficial ownership transparency. I think it's very important to have the legal framework in place, and in the legal framework, in the law, you can give access or not, and or for example, you can send an official request as a CSO to ask information. So depend on the legal framework, and this is why it's very important when you draft the legal framework to involve the community in the in this legal in the law for beneficial ownership. This is why I wanted to add that it's very important to have NGOs and communities involved in the drafting law for beneficial ownership.
Thank you so much, Florica. And that's a really important point because, as mentioned by Florica, CSOs, NGOs, have a lot at stake. So it's really important for them to push for these particular provisions in the law. So we'd like to call on the delegate from Nauru, if you're happy to share with us your experience.
Everyone, am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I am the in charge of the business section here in Nauru, and so we register all the legal entities involving the sole proprietorships, corporations, associations, and under associations we actually include the NGOs, the one we were talking about. So, as far as our legislation under the Beneficial Ownership Act 2017 is concerned, we not just collect data under the Beneficial Ownership Registry, we also provide access to the police, to the Financial Intelligence Unit, to the Director of Public Prosecutions, Customs, etc., so that the data can actually be used while they detect something suspicious, say regarding money laundering or terrorist financing. So they can effectively use that data. And not long ago, we had people here or representatives for Egmont membership. So Nauru will soon be having the Egmont membership, and for which the beneficial ownership registry is important too. So they were highly impressed with our beneficial ownership register. And to even digitalize it further and improvise upon it, we are taking the help of Asian Development Bank for this to develop the registry further. So yeah, and I believe we are first in the Pacific to actually have a beneficial ownership declaration form, which was introduced with the 2023 beneficial ownership regulations. So we call upon all the legal entities to declare their beneficial owner, not just register one, but they have to come forward now and to declare their beneficial owners. The registration of beneficial ownership is included with the registration of businesses. We do not actually go forward and give the registration certificate to any of the businesses until and unless the registration of beneficial owner has been done properly. So yeah, that's the process. So each and every business entity, the legal entity that's been registered with Nauru has the beneficial owner in place. Yeah. Anything else you would like to ask? I'm happy to answer.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you. And if you have questions, thank you. For the other participants, feel free to type it in the chat as well. Deffnie. Oh, yeah, thank you. Deffnie, going over to you. What do you think, what can CSOs or in your case, youth organizations do to push further for transparency reforms, specifically around getting access to beneficial ownership data?
Thank you, Amy. I think from a point of view and from past experiences I've had, I think one of the most important thing is to have this strong partnership or between private and government offices. I think partnership is one one of the things that will help strengthen, our work as journalists and those seeking for information, as well as, keeping them more advanced in having reforms relating to beneficial ownership. So I think, having a stronger partnership would be one of the ideal way forward towards it.
Thank you so much for that. And over to you, Florica. In your last workshop or session that you had, one of the items that you discussed is around regional cooperation. So what support do you think is needed to make reforms work in the Pacific region, specifically in terms of regional partnership and cooperation?
Well, as I already presented, so I think to make beneficial ownership reforms work effectively in the Pacific, we need a coordinated approach around. We need to work for legal reforms, for institutional capacity, and to develop the digital infrastructure. All should be tailored to the unique context of Pacific Island countries. So at the legal and policy level, countries must be supported to develop clear and context legal frameworks for each country. As I already presented and we discovered during our event in February, most jurisdictions are at the early stage, of policy design or legislative drafting stage. The law needs to be settled, as I said before, the registries should be implemented. So this requires dedicated legal and policy support to ensure that beneficial ownership definitions, reporting obligations, and enforcement mechanisms are aligned with international standards, but also remain practical for small jurisdictions with limited administrative capacity. So as I already told you, our team is currently finalizing a regional roadmap on the establishment of and functioning of beneficial ownership registers, which offers detailed guidance to practitioners and can serve as a blueprint of these reforms in Pacific. Second, the reforms cannot succeed without strong institutional capacity. Many government agencies, registrars, FIUs, supervisory bodies need technical training, mentoring, and long-term support to implement and enforce biodisclosures rules. We must, all international organizations, must invest in sustained capacity building efforts, and not just workshops, but hands-on training, peer learning exchanges, and advisory missions. We started not with beneficial ownership, but we will try also to implement this kind of activities to develop the skills necessary to verify data, conduct risk-based assessment, and coordinate across sectors. Another aspect is that technology must be leveraged strategically. Many Pacific, as I've told you, many Pacific countries already use the PSD regional registry platform, which offers an efficient and cost-effective path to implement centralized bioregisters. The platform's existing structure can be expanded to include biodata without the need to develop costly new systems. So support is needed for digital integration. Yes. And we also probably need I'm sure that we need public-private collaboration in this process. Private sector actors must be part of this conversation of BO beneficial ownership transparency. So yes, this is my
Thank you. Thank you so much,
answer.
Florica. Arushi, if you don't mind, I have a question on how Nauru, implemented BOT. Do you currently have a publicly accessible register?
Yeah, we do. Actually, the register can be accessed by a payment of fee by anyone who wants to access the register. They need to consult or like come to the business registry and they can get the information. And apart from that, I already told you about the information that can be accessed by the FYU, the police, and DPP, and all of that. So yeah.
Thank you so much. And that's really important to note, can you share with us a little bit about how you came to the decision of making the register publicly accessible, and have there been benefits that you perceive on having a publicly accessible register?
So far, we have actually received the queries mainly from the police and the FIU and DPP, and not really from the public. Yeah, they're like lesser queries from the public pertaining to the beneficial ownership. So I would not be able to actually provide, an answer to that because
Yeah.
I haven't experienced much of the public queries regarding that. So yeah.
Thank you so much for that. And that's actually a really important point. And coming back to Deffnie, because I think that maybe, and I'm just surmising that maybe one of the reasons that they haven't accessed the registry is they're not aware of how they could use BO data. And maybe I'd like to ask Deffnie to chime in and respond to that.
Thank you, Emily. I think it will also ask us a question that we would ask is that why are they not aware? So I would also add that there's need for more advocacy and awareness on the need of having BO in place. So if people are aware that there is need to have BO in place, then I think everything will be just connected, and it will be great. Instead of if we have the idea of saying we could have the PO in place, then there's no awareness or advocacy in it, then that might not work. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to encourage the audience, the participants, to please ask more questions. And I just want to share one quick slide, a case study actually on just to respond to the benefits of having a publicly accessible register. If you would allow me, let me just quickly share my screen. This is going to be shared with you as part of my presentation. So this is a case study involving an investigation on a publicly exposed person from Argentina and what the journalists did with the BO data. So Gianfranco Macri, the brother of the former Argentine president, he was the owner of several corporations. However, the journalists in Argentina were struggling to find information about the link between their president and these assets that are located abroad. Luxembourg maintains a publicly accessible register. And so a lot of UK also maintains a publicly accessible register, for instance, of properties of foreigners. And so what the journalists did is to go beyond their country, go beyond Argentina, and search for these links in these public registries. And they found that there was a chain of entities that were created to develop these wind farms in Argentina. So this is the declaring company, the wind park business. This was actually owned by several companies called Sidsel and Sideli. And then on top of that, even more companies that were registered abroad. The only, interestingly, these chain of entities were registered in Argentina, Spain, Luxembourg, and these entities were used to buy and sell the wind farms during the presidency. So as you can see in the slide, the deal was worth 70 million. So the only link that they found was that the wife of the president appeared as a beneficial owner for one day in one of the companies registered in Luxembourg. So what I want to point out here is really the transnational nature of these types of grand scale corruption. Of course, in order for the proceeds not to be detected, they would normally try to, use these entities to transfer these assets abroad. But by having these public registries available to anyone, then they're able to find these chains and these links. So I just wanted to point out what the significance is of understanding how BO data can be used, where to find it, and of course, including, just the knowledge that these types of crimes are transnational. So regional cooperation is very important. Okay.
Emily, there's a question, and it's Julie here, question in the chat from Jill Donnelly asking if there are any tools that combine the data from beneficial ownership registers that are available globally. So there are any global tools that are being used to actually use it and bulk up these one. I also had a separate question, which I was hoping it could be looked at as well, which is it's not just about companies, it's also about trusts, limited partnerships and foundations. So the problem in New Zealand, we have a good companies register. We don't have a beneficial ownership register, not even, and yet, although so it's not yet, not anywhere near there yet. But we also don't have any we don't have any transparency around trusts, which are used quite a lot as a mechanism in New Zealand. So in some countries, these are being used as well. So that's the other challenge that goes alongside. But if you could just address Jill Donnelly's question first, that would be great. Tools to globally link the data.
Thank you so much, Julie. Indeed, I have been using companies in a general sense, but you're right to point out, actually in open ownership, we now use the term corporate vehicles to capture all these types of other entities as well. So let me share with you some of our So in terms of combining these data sets, and that's a very good question. So I just wanted to share with you that if you go to our website, this is a good starting point on the status of BO implementation. So we do have a map, a global map, and we try as much as we can to update this. Of course, it's not always updated. But there you would find at least, links to actual registers. So just as an example, so this is the live register of the UK, which is publicly accessible. As you can see, this is the PSC register and then the register of overseas entities. Another important source, and you may all already know about this, is the Offshore Leaks database. Which contains information not just about legal entities, but all other relevant information that could be used for investigating corruption. And then you have OCCRP Aleph, of course, and it currently contains information of around 417 million public entities. you have the Open Corporate's website, and then the Open Sanctions database. In terms of and I really do apologize if it's not in this particular slide, but the other sources of data that you can consider could be within the country stock exchange, of course, for publicly listed companies. And it's important to note here that when you're investigating beneficial owners, you don't just rely on the BO information itself, but you also use the company ownership data. And again, for PLCs, these are publicly available. In terms of combining data sets, we do have some links that we could share with you after this presentation. So we have combined PEP's data with extractives data, for example. We've done that as a pilot in Nigeria, and it has worked very effectively, because then we used information about these extractive companies to try to link any politically exposed person, in particular those who are responsible for granting or approving their specific licenses. I'll stop there. I will share a list of the publicly accessible sites where you could actually combine these data sets as well as visualize these chains of ownership. We had partnered with Open Sanctions for that particular project. I think there is another question. Yes. Okay, thank you so much, and happy to, if you'd like to email me as well, I've included my email in the presentation for any follow-up questions. I think there was a question from Lucky. Yes, indeed. Indonesia has a publicly accessible register, and the link should be there in the map as well. So I think with this, maybe final thoughts from Florica and Deffnie before we conclude. So let's start with you, Deffnie. I'm so sorry, Deffnie, but we're having trouble hearing you.
Just share my last presentation.
Okay, we can hear you now. Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, can I just ask if Rochelle is there to just share my last presentation, last slide?
Sure, I'm just getting it up.
The last one. The last one with the picture. Yep. Okay, so I would like to know the previous one. The one with the canoe. Exactly. So just to give my final word, I would like to say that, we come from different backgrounds, and, we are advocates, we are watchdogs, we are policymakers, we are decision makers. So the canoe, if you can see clearly, there's a mercury engine from a fiberglass boat that was put into a canoe. So what I would like to say is that, we can come from different backgrounds, but there's only, we are all working for the same thing. So if we are to make sure that PO ownership, beneficial ownership is, all the Pacific Island countries are to implement beneficial ownership, I think it would be just possible. So if the owner of that canoe can get a Yamaha engine boat from a fiberglass boat and put it in the canoe, then I think we can also do that as well. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Deffnie, for that inspiring thought. So over to you, Florica, for any final words.
From our point of view, I think it's very important that we should continue with capacity building sessions to provide technical support and training for authorities and reporting entities. And also we should learn from the countries from the region that already implemented beneficial ownership legislation and register like Nauru, and from other from other countries, from other part of the world that already work on the beneficial ownership. And yes, I think our we should focus on continuing our work on promoting the benefits of the beneficial ownership transparency and implementation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Florica. With that, I'm very, again, I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to be your facilitator for today. And thank you so much for DINC for organizing. I'd like to hand over now to Julie.
Thank you very much. I'd really like to thank our three, Emily in particular, and our two speakers, Florica and Deffnie, as well, for giving us their perspectives on what it's like, what the challenges are, and how to engage. And I think that point that Deffnie made about the building strong relationships between civil society and regulators is really important, because you can put something in place, but unless the people in the country are walking alongside of you, there really isn't going to be that understanding. So I think because it's quite a tricky exercise, having that gatherings of people to actually understand, so there's joint understanding, is really important. And I attended online the February Cross-Pacific event, and it was just a revelation about the different challenges that people face, and the level of understanding as well. It was quite variable. And also just that some countries are still working off manual card systems for company listings. It's really a challenge to get that technology element right as well, and to maintain it correctly. Anyway, I'm saying thank you, and that's what I'm going to say. I thank ngā mihi nui to the speakers and all those who've spread the word about our webinar series and attending today. And thanks for those who asked questions and spoke. That's really good. Mihi kia koutou mō ngā pātai. And thank you so much for attending, for everybody. But there is more coming. We've got another 3 sets webinar series on environmental governance coming up. The first is on 5th of June, so not far off. So please look out for the information coming out, and also keep an eye on our website. Our third series into August will be on women leading in the Pacific, and that's going to be an equally strong event. So I'm going to end, because I'm half Irish. I'm going to end with an Irish Gaelic blessing for you all to take with you. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. The rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may your God hold you in the palm of their hand. Thank you very much. Bye.